Hello, Lions Nation, and welcome to another edition of Believe in Lions. It is brought to you by FanDuel. I'm Trevor Thompson. Glad to have you along. And with the NFL draft just 3 weeks away, everybody's hyped up for it, including our guest today, who's going to lend some insights on not only what the Lions are doing, but what might be going on around the NFL as far as the draft concerns. He's all dialed in. He's got his fingerprints all over this upcoming draft. He is an NFL analyst and college football analyst and co-host of the Preferred Walk-On Football Show alongside his partner, Max Chadwick. I give you Dalton Wasserman. And Dalton, thank you very much for taking time out this morning to talk about the upcoming draft and talk about what the Lions' needs may be. But before we get into all of that, I know you guys spend tons and tons of hours watching college football, breaking down tapes, analyzing NFL teams and their needs. Can you just give our audience a sense of how you go about your job, how many hours you put into it to come up with your mock drafts and know exactly what teams are looking for and what their needs might be heading into the draft to do the work that you do?
I mean, it's so much fun, right? I think the first thing you mentioned there is you just have to be willing to put in the time, right? It's a lot of tape grinding, one player at a time, and even going back and doing it again. You know, for NFL and college, I was breaking down games for the last couple of seasons during the season, but it also takes one last watch because I always say watching games to see who wins as a team versus watching a singular player evaluation, two different tasks, right? So I always go back on all of these players, even though I have a pretty good knowledge watching them, you know, especially the last 2 or 3 years, I got a pretty good knowledge, but you got to go back and really see the traits one more time and really see those one-on-one matchups one more time. So the first thing really is putting in the time, right? And then every analyst, every scout is going to tell you, you have to find your set of traits that you're looking for at every position and in every player, right? So I think that's something, you know, especially during my time at PFF, which actually just ended, but over the last 6 years, really I've learned that part of it is how granular to break it down and really get every player's assignment, every player's technique down to a science, right? And everybody figures it out their own way. So when it comes to evaluating players, I mean, I kind of put it in a simple way. There's 3 things I look at: hands, feet, and eyes. And to a different degree, every position, they're going to tell you something different, right? The footwork is key for any position in its own way. The hands, it could be, you know, a receiver with you know, catching the football. It could be a corner and press technique. It could be a pass rush set, you know, a pass rush set for a defensive end, right? It could be anything. And then the eyes, to me, something I love looking at is trying to interpret how well a player can see the game, his field vision, and how quickly he can process what's in front of him, because that can leave a player a step ahead in his process of executing.
Hands, feet, and eyes, I get that. But when it comes to the heart, who do you go to for that? Is it coaches you talk to? Is it scouts you talk to? Players themselves, GMs? Who determines what a guy's made of?
At the end of the day, the player himself, right? And there's certain guys you do watch. And, you know, a lot of those guys, to get to the level where you can be drafted by an NFL team in any round, it doesn't really matter. You got to be different than even all of your peers in college football, right? Because that's the 1% of the 1% of guys who even get drafted. You can see it in tape, though. I mean, there's every year there's 15 to 20 guys. I almost, you know, I talk about it with some of the guys here, and it's almost like you could create an all-dog team, right? Like where you just, and those are the fun guys. Those are the fun guys to watch, right? The guards that finish blocks at the second level, 15 yards down the field, the 5'8", 170-pound corner that's flying up and tackling 230-pound backs. There's just certain actions at the end of the day on a football field. So, I mean, look, teams do a great job. They have all the connections. They talk to everybody about the character evaluation of these guys. But so often you can see it on the tape when, you know, both ways, when a guy is lagging a little bit and he doesn't bring it every play. But those guys who are just the dogs on the field every single snap, and they would almost die out there to just win a ball game, man, you can see that on tape. And to me, that does play a big part in it.
And you know what, Dalton? I've come to learn over the years, a lot of those guys turn out to be the guys who are undrafted. You give them an opportunity to come to camp, and they just ball their balls off, really, and they come up with some just really diamonds in the rough. Guys finds diamonds in the rough each and every year with the undrafted guys, and those are some of the guys I really cheer for and really appreciate with what they end up doing with their careers. What are your thoughts in that department?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the underdog mentality, some of those guys have that. I think about even take a Cam Ward last year, who went from a 0-star recruit playing at Incarnate Word out of high school, and then he's the number 1 overall pick in the draft, right? And you notice, you know, with that underdog mentality, it never leaves those guys. They just always feel disrespected, and the good ones really take that disrespect and they channel it onto everybody else on the football field. And then you watch him and you go, man, that guy's he's angry, man. He's out here playing angry, but it's the type of mentality that you want, especially in those underdogs. And you need need those guys, right? You're not just going to get every guy that comes up as the number one prospect since he was in sixth grade and all of that stuff, and they're gifted with all this ability. You need some of those guys that are willing to work to get better, because that's really what rounds out, especially the character of your football team.
Yeah. Okay, well, let's start our analysis today at the top of the draft, and then we'll work our way down to the Lions, who have the 17th overall pick in the first round. And FanDuel right now says at the top of the draft, it's going to be Fernando Mendoza at minus 20,000 as the number one overall pick. I'm not sure if that's a lock for you, if you see something different as far as that goes. And then at number 2, they've got Arvell Reese, and number 3, David Bailey. Those are the odds-on favorites right there at the top of the draft in the top 3. What are your thoughts as far as how that might shake out before we move further down the draft?
Look, I think it makes a lot of sense, and I think the structure of this draft is such that maybe you don't have Fernando Mendoza as the best football player, say on a big board in a neutral sense, but he's close enough to the top of that, and to me, he is the best quarterback in this draft. And the Raiders having their quarterback need that they do, he's going to go first overall. I think there's already been rumors spreading that he's already basically learning the Raiders offense as we go here. It's a formality at this point. He had such a great season, and the one thing I like about Mendoza, another guy, bit of an underdog, right, and kind of the improvement that he had each of his 2 years at Cal going forward, and then into Indiana, and just continuing to work on his body and his mechanics and his process, right? And some people might think, oh, he's coming from, an RPO heavy offense and this, but he's another one. His character and his toughness and his willingness to lead his football team, I think that's really going to play a big part in his progress at the next level. Is he going to be a top 5 quarterback his rookie year, like say maybe a Jaden Daniels was? I don't necessarily think that, especially with the team he's likely going to, but I really believe within 3 to 4 years, he's got the ability to be a top 10 quarterback in the NFL, right? Might not be on the prospect level of Caleb Williams and Trevor Lawrence, but I really think he has that ability to get there if the Raiders just build it right. And then you look at the rest of the top 10. I mean, you start there with the top 3. You're going to get some outstanding defensive football players taken, right? I think this draft class on the whole is heavier in depth and talent on the defensive side of the ball. So the favorite right now being Arvell Reese to the New York Jets at number 2. I think he could be a special linebacker prospect, but he's also got the pass rush ability that some people think, hey, put a few more pounds on him, could be an edge rusher, figure it out. And then guys like David Bailey, Reuben Bain. I can't tell you how big a fan I am of Caleb Downs, watching him the last 3 years back there at safety. I know there's positional value that comes with safety, but I think that guy should be a lock top 10 pick. So really, to me, the story after Mendoza with the first pick is what is the run and what order do those really talented defensive players go in that top 10, and they could eventually be some of the best defensive players in football.
Do you see any surprises before we get to the Lions at 17?
I think I'm very curious on a couple of things. One, how quickly do the top and how many of the top tier receivers in this class go before that, right? Because if you're talking about, okay, all the receivers are going early, maybe the Lions with an offensive tackle need get somebody to slip to them that they need, ahead of, with some teams ahead. Some of them have offensive line needs, but where is the run of receivers going to happen? There's the Ty Simpson question, of course, of where do these NFL scouts and evaluators, where do they really value him? Is it a top 16 pick? Is it a back half of the first round pick? Is it somebody's going to trade up to get him like Jackson Dart last year? And then I think a lot of the offensive line questions, and this is really pertinent to Detroit here, is, you don't have a ton of proven left tackle options, but there's also a lot of right tackle options. I know that's been in the spotlight lately with all the talk of Penei Sewell maybe switching sides, but a lot of the question marks for me are on the offensive side of the ball. Very confident in the defensive class in this draft. The offensive side of the ball, there's not a ton of proven top-tier talent. So I'm curious how early teams push for that before they want to get into maybe the depth of the defensive class.
So would you see a run if a couple of offensive linemen start to go early? Do you see a run on offensive linemen before we get to the Lions, or you think teams are going to be more patient? Is it going to be a need sort of thing for a team that might be picking? How do you see that shaking out as far as when we get to the Lions, maybe looking for a tackle in that position?
I think there is a need portion to it. I think it starts with the Cleveland Browns at 6. They're one who they have a major left tackle need. So are they going to go with, a left tackle at 6? Or are they going to go about it like that? I think there's also a question of how does the NFL evaluate some of these tackles who have been talked about potentially moving to the inside, right? And if there's a lot of teams with ideas on moving Francis Mauigoa from Miami to the inside, Spencer Fano from Utah to the inside, right? Got a lot of teams with interior offensive line needs too. I think about the Cardinals and the Browns even, and I think about the Baltimore Ravens at 14, right? Those teams have interior needs as well. So if they feel like, hey, some of these tackles, like a Spencer Fano is a guy that I've mocked to Detroit a lot at 17.
Yeah.
But if there's a team that feels like he's a guard, say Baltimore at 14, might not be available. If they think they don't want him and they don't trust him enough as a guard, maybe he slides to 17. So the positional alignment to me from these teams on these offensive linemen is more intriguing this year than I think even in years past.
Okay, so let's get to the Lions at 17 then. Like you said, I saw your mock. I saw Fano at 17 for the Lions, in your opinion. I've also saw Monroe Freeling in a couple of mocks I've seen where the tackle from Georgia goes to the Lions right there. Who else might you have in mind? And give me just your assessment on those two guys in particular, maybe other places they might go if those guys aren't available.
Yeah, I think the one theme, I'll start with those two. The one theme with both Fano and Freeling, when you talk about athleticism, if you pair one of those two guys with Penei Sewell, whichever side he's playing on, you might have the most athletic pair of tackles in the league, right? And when you talk about Detroit trying to run to the perimeter a lot with Jahmyr Gibbs, those outside zone schemes, what's going to be valued along with strength and power as always on the offensive line, but it's going to be the athleticism. Monroe Freeling with one of the best combines really we've ever seen from an offensive tackle. Spencer Fano, what he lacks in length and he needs to add a little more strength, he makes up for in athleticism. Just an extremely athletic guy that gets to the second level with ease. So I think that's a big theme when you talk about the Lions still trying to run those zone schemes, trying to run to the perimeter. They value lateral movement in offensive tackles, and I would argue those are the two most athletic offensive linemen in this draft. Otherwise, I think if you're looking at 17 or maybe even trading down a few spots, I think Clemson's Blake Miller would be someone who really intrigues them, right? Maybe more of a B to B plus athlete than those two guys who are A to A plus athletes, but he's nasty. He's super experienced. Guys don't just start at Clemson for 4 straight years at offensive tackle, right? I think he's a guy who maybe not quite the ceiling of those two, but somebody who can come in and I think could be a rock solid 10-year starter. He's a really solid player, and he's one of those guys, I think, there's certain guys I evaluate and I just go, yeah, I know what I'm getting out of him. Blake Miller is one of those guys. I just know what I'm getting out of him. And if you're moving Penei Sewell over to the left side, and even if they wanted to trade down even 8 to 10 spots, I think Miller could be an option for him out of Clemson.
I also wonder, guys who do what you do, college football experts, draft analysts, the guys who watch the combine and break down as much film as you do, how does your view of what a team might need or who might fit a guy's program differ from the actual GMs and the scouts of that team themselves? Have you ever studied that, or can you break that down or quantify that in any way for us?
I think for me, it's so much. I'm always looking at scheme fits, especially. I'm very like an X and O kind of what schemes, and I love watching the college game during the season, and even watching certain offensive coordinators or defensive coordinators operate. Like I look for those type of X and O similarities, and even positional similarities, right? Like there are certain guys, and I love that our lead, I guess now our former lead draft analyst Trevor Sikkema, he was starting to really get into making team specific boards that all 32 boards look different based on what they look for and what schemes they run, right? So I'll take a player like just one off the top of my head is like a Jennings Dunker, the offensive tackle from Iowa. There are certain teams where I go absolutely, and there are certain other teams based on scheme where I go absolutely not, right? So it's kind of that thing where I think we get so consumed with making big boards and making just all these things in a vacuum. And yes, in a neutral sense, we have more time to sit around and evaluate these players during the college season than a lot of even NFL teams do with everything they're trying to do at the NFL level. But I love scheme fits. That's the one for me where I go, what type of players does this team need, right? I think about, this team doesn't throw in the intermediate area of the field enough, right? And if they need a certain receiver, I might say, hey, they need Jordan Tyson more than they need a Carnell Tate, right? So player type and scheme fit are really, really fun for me to pair up, especially getting to watch the college game on a week-to-week basis.
Yeah, and I just asked that question because it seems like Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell look for a certain type of guy. They want a gritty guy or they want a certain athlete. Like I think back to last year when they traded up to get Isaac Tesla, and as a result, they don't have a 3rd-round pick this season. But they saw something in the kid that they thought fit the culture that they wanted to build around. And I just wonder if sometimes they go out of their way to find certain guys that fit what they're looking for as opposed to needs or players, and how you saw that shaking out, which is why I asked the question.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, it feels like that's one of the classic ones. We hear it with different organizations talked about in the draft community, where even I'll do it sometimes. Oh, that's a Kyle Shanahan type of guy, right? Or that's that's a Steve Spagnuolo type of guy. I do that with certain like defensive backs and things. But Dan Campbell, certainly. I mean, that's one I hear the most is, oh, that's just Dan Campbell's type of guy, right? Where it's just like something and it usually seems to go with just some sort of angry, gritty, aggressive football player that's going to lay it on the line, just like Dan Campbell used to, or even as he does now as he's coaching, for sure. But I do like too that it goes, first of all, it's built in the trenches with Detroit, right? They want those guys in the trenches to really set the tone, but it spreads throughout the whole team too. I think about even the leaders on this team, like an Amon-Ra St. Brown, right? Where it's just, taken obviously in day 3 of the draft, but he's just so darn gritty. He's just grittier than everyone else. I think about, Aiden Hutchinson, even at the top of the draft, right? Where it's like, man, I thought he should have been the number 1 pick that year, surefire. And he's going to go out there as the 2nd pick feeling slighted, going, I'm going to give you everything I have. And that's what he does. So whether it's at the very top, like a guy like Hutch, or all those day 3 guys that, day 2 and 3 guys that have success, you do have those those characteristics that you're looking for, even the intangibles. I know the Rams and the Jags with those regimes, Les Snead and James Gladstone, they talk about their whole intangible system, that they want a certain character of guy on their football team. And I think the Lions have a lot of that too.
Right. Well, I want to get to the Lions' 2nd round and beyond. But before we do that, let me take a second here to get to our friends at ZipRecruiter, because they want to mention here on our podcast today with Believe in Lions. So if you're hiring and you want a candidate who's passionate about your role, you can't get the insight from a resume unless you post your job on ZipRecruiter. And now you can try ZipRecruiter for free at ZipRecruiter.com/audio. ZipRecruiter's powerful matching technology finds candidates quickly. And ZipRecruiter has a new feature that shows you the most interested, qualified candidates first so that you can meet the right people faster. Candidates can tell you in their own words why they're interested in your job. Find candidates who really want your job at ZipRecruiter. 4 out of 5 employers who post on ZipRecruiter get a quality candidate within the first day, and you can try it for free at ZipRecruiter.com/audio. That's ZipRecruiter.com/audio. Meet your match on ZipRecruiter. Tough finding a job out there. I'll tell you what, I've been looking. Not always easy. So
you're telling me.
Not always easy. Maybe I'll link up with ZipRecruiter and see if I can find myself a gig going forward. But right now we're talking football, and you're in your gig, in your element right now, talking about the upcoming draft and what the Lions might do. They have 8 to 9 picks in the draft, and at number 2, we've gone through this. It might be a philosophical thing. The Lions have had a need at edge. I thought that maybe edge was where you might find a player in the draft, and they've had a need on the offensive line. I thought maybe because you need experience in that role and they need to rebuild, they might try to find that in free agency. Doesn't look like they've done that. It looks like they are going to go with an O-lineman in the draft. How do you see that shaking out as far as the 2nd round goes? Will there be an edge there for them at that point? You said it's deep on the defensive side of the ball this year. Or do you maybe see them taking an edge in the 1st round if somebody slips? How do you see that shaking out in the first 2 rounds as far as their needs go?
I think if somebody slips, for sure. I mean, you always want to go into the draft with a flexible approach of, every team is going to have their board and they're going to have their priorities. And in this draft, I think especially with the edge rushers, I think edge defender is the deepest, the most talented group in this draft. I think you can get value all the way through the 4th, maybe even into the 5th round, even with role players in that sense. So when you talk about the Lions and the edge group at the very top, they don't have to force it at 17 at all. I think the priority for me would be, first of all, to look at the offensive line. And in that situation, it's very clear. They've made it obvious they're looking for a tackle, right? Taylor Decker's not there anymore. They've mentioned that they're at least flexible and willing to move Penei Sewell to the left side if need be. So I would really focus more on the offensive line in the 1st round. But if somebody drops, right, let's say, if people are concerned about Reuben Bain's arm length so much that he drops to 17, yeah, I'd sprint the card in for that guy, right? So you always just wait and see how the board shakes out. But for me, I would really look probably on that offensive line side first and foremost at 17, because the day 2 edge group especially is so deep. There's going to be really, really talented players in the 2nd round. Malachi Lawrence possibly from UCF, Derek Moore from Michigan, Denai Dennis Sutton from Penn State, Gabe Akis from Illinois. There's so many guys who I think can contribute and work into the rotation that are 2nd round picks that I think in thinner edge groups in previous years could have been late 1st round picks, right? Zion Young from Missouri, I think he would fit in very, very well on that Detroit roster. So I think when you look at, if there's somebody they absolutely love and they absolutely have to have at 17, sure. But I think edge rusher is the position in this draft that you can most wait on, and you can get a talented player in the next round or 2.
Okay, well, take me to the fourth round then, because the Lions, as I mentioned, with that Tesla trade last year, do not have a pick in the third round. But thanks to the David Montgomery trade this year, they've got 2 picks in the fourth. How deep are we getting when you talk about guys that might be available that late in the draft on the edge or maybe on the O-line or a different need? I mean, Alex Anzalone has moved on. Maybe there's a linebacker you like in the fourth round. Maybe there's another need you see for the Lions in the fourth round. But where would you go there?
Yeah, no, I mean, you keep looking in the front seven. I think those 2 spots and even in the interior offensive line, I think day 2 and early day 3 is the sweet spot for interior if you're looking for depth there. But if you're looking at, say, round 4, maybe even getting aggressive and trading back up into round 3, you're looking at edge rushers like a Jayshawn Barham, who's a really good run defender at Michigan, Derek Moore's teammate. I talk about a Tyreek Sapp, who's also an extremely good run defender, a little undersized from Florida, but he can do some versatile things for you. And a guy from the other side of the state there in Michigan, Nadeem Tucker from Western Michigan, is someone who really intrigues me. Led the entire nation in pass rush win rate. I'll be honest with you, I didn't catch him until later in the season when Max and I were previewing the MAC title game, their win over Miami, Ohio. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden I'm like, who is this demon? All this, like, that's atop all of our stats and metrics and the leaderboards. And then I watch him and I'm like, man, oh man, okay, Western Michigan's got a pass rush with this guy, right? And he goes out in the MAC title game, 10 pressures and 2 sacks, I believe it was, just best player on the field. So
the Lions have 2 picks in the 6th. So as we get later in the draft, I'm wondering, give me some names of some sleepers that might be out there.
I think you continue to look at the defensive line class, right? If you're looking for just role players, right? I really like, if you want a run stopper on the inside, like an Albert Regis from Texas A&M, right? I think about linebackers, a really deep group as well. And, maybe some of the linebackers that won't go early on, but Aiden Fisher from Indiana, the national title winning Hoosiers, he's a player who I think could add a lot. Red Murdoch is a very low-key player from Buffalo, also in the MAC, who was one of our highest graded linebackers, I believe over the last 2 seasons, but this year he's a guy who just attacks the football. So again, I just think the depth of this defensive class with the talent that there is in the first 3 rounds, it's pushing some solid talents down into rounds 5, 6, and 7, where you can find contributors on that side of the ball. And then the other one too is it's a pretty deep receiver class. I think at the top end, it's not as great as past years, but I think there's a lot of role players at wide receiver who could really help you out too.
I want to change the topic just a little bit here. Last week on our show, we had a couple of the Lions insiders, Dave Burkett and Tim Twentyman, on the show. And they brought up an interesting topic, and that's NIL and how it affects how GM scouts look at the draft. With the money that's out there, how guys move around, what really incentivizes some of these kids, how they react if they get some of the money in a big NIL deal. I'm wondering from your perspective, how you've seen that play out, whether it's a concern for an analyst like yourself or scouts that you talk to as far as the NIL goes and how it affects how guys are viewed in the draft.
Yeah, I think they're just viewed differently. From that sense, it's not necessarily better or worse. One thing that I think we've seen a lot of people say is these guys, because you always get concerned, right? It's how do these guys live their life with somewhat life-changing money, right? Those guys in college football making 7 figures, and there's a lot of them, right? You get quarterbacks now that are getting rumored deals between, $7 to $10 million a year. How do they handle that? And even the pressure that comes with it, right? It's a question, I think, for a lot of players, especially a lot of players who are not used to having that money. Do they go and do stupid things with it, right? Do they handle it well? Do they still go about their business in a consistent manner? So I think what it allows NFL evaluators to do is look at these guys even in a more professional way when they're doing the character evaluations, right? Is it, because I think there was always that air of like, oh, I'm just getting what people tell me. But with all the money on the line, it's going to be much more publicized. And when you talk about getting in the transfer portal and some guys playing at 3, 4, 5 different schools, is the character consistent across schools, right? Or are they leaving these places because they're butting heads with the coaching staff? They're getting in trouble. There's something going on, right? There's only so much an NFL team is going to be willing to tolerate. So I think it allows them to put it into a perspective that they're going to monitor their own players for in the NFL. And especially with these guys going to multiple teams now, they might take a little more searching, but they can talk to multiple coaching staffs and see if there's any inconsistencies.
Yeah. Another thing I wanted to get your take on is at the NFL owners meetings, they decided that they would not extend the ability to trade draft picks into 5 years down the road. What were your thoughts on that? Were you thinking that might be a good thing, a bad thing, or how do you fall on it now they've decided they're not going to go that route?
I was interested
in it personally.
It's such a fascinating debate, right? Because I think it was the Browns that brought it up, right? And they wanted it brought up as a rule change. And I think I don't necessarily lean one way or the other as to whether they should or shouldn't do it. I think just what it does is that, like the NBA, right, where you see when teams do that and they trade first round picks 5 and 7 years out or whatever it is they do in the NBA, and they're just a haul of draft picks going for one player. Trust me, I'm a Brooklyn Nets fan, so when we traded everything we had for Kevin Durant and James Harden, it was like his toe was on the line, and now we're gonna be dead for a while, but. But I think the risk is kind of with the beholder there, right? And I could understand why some NFL teams, a lot of GMs probably looked at that and go, I would never do that anyway, so I'll just vote against it. But I think it just really goes to, look, if you want to trade your next 5 years first round picks in that scenario, if that rule was passed, you assume that risk, right? But you assume the risk of your franchise being a mess for possibly 8 to 10 years is what that could cost you, right? So I don't see anything wrong with it necessarily either way in a neutral. So like as a fan, I think it would probably be a lot of fun to watch, right? Like, this team gave up every first round pick through 2035. Wow, okay, this better work. Like it's kind of that thing to an even greater, because even now, like look how many GMs are skittish for only a very select few players to give up even 2 first round picks with as valuable as they are in the NFL, right? So to extend that out to 5, I almost think it would be fun to watch, to go, man, who's gutsy enough to do that? Who's gutsy enough to give out their next 5 first-round picks for, I don't know, maybe it could open up trades for even franchise quarterbacks and things like that, right? So it would be fun. I understand why it's getting shot down, because I think most GMs would not do it. But it would be a fun theory. I don't mind it.
Yeah. The GMs that don't see themselves there in 5 years might be willing to take that gamble, trying to extend their lifetime, trying to extend their term with a certain team and try and make something happen. And then, hey, I can't worry about that. I'm not going to be around here 5 years from now if we don't get this done anyway. So let's roll the dice. It'd be interesting. But I just wanted to get your take on that. Before we go, I want to go to the FanDuel odds in the NFC North right now. The Lions are still the odds-on favorite at plus 165 to win the NFC North over the Packers, who actually have better odds than the Lions when it comes to the Super Bowl odds. I still can't figure that out in my mind how that works. But is there a team in the NFC North that you think can drastically impact their fortunes with a couple of picks, the right guy in the upcoming draft right now?
Wow. I'll be honest with you. I think all 4 of them could. I think this is still maybe the hardest division to predict in football, top to bottom. I like the way the Vikings look if they get any improvement at quarterback with Kyler Murray and they can keep filling in on defense. If I was picking one, I think I would probably say the Bears, actually. And I know they won the division last year, but so much of their success, especially on defense, was based on the league leading turnover margin, right? But that doesn't usually carry over. That's kind of noisy. It doesn't usually carry over statistically to the next year. So they really need to just get consistently better on defense. I like a couple of the moves they made. Devin Bush at linebacker, Kobe Bryant at safety, but they've got some holes to fill on that defense. And especially in their pass rush, they got to get a lot better. This draft, especially with an extra second-round pick from that DJ Moore trade, this draft, as defensive heavy as it is an opportunity for the Bears to really set a new foundation for their defense. Because if they walk into this year and they're still inconsistent and just waiting for all the turnovers to happen, that doesn't usually happen 2 years in a row. So do I think the Bears are in a spot where they could take a regression, a step back, especially with all the close games in the last 2 minutes that they won? That usually doesn't carry over year to year either. Could they take a step back? Yes. But if they nailed the defensive part of this draft especially, they could get right back to where they were and beyond if their offense is even better.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting. Can't wait to see this all shake out 3 weeks from now in Pittsburgh when we have the NFL draft. Will we be on the scene? Do you have any plans to attend?
No, not right now, no.
So you and I will both be watching from home over the couple of days that they broadcast the NFL draft. It's going to be interesting. We'll see what the Lions do, what the rest of the NFC North does, and we'll circle back after that with you, Dalton, and break down what your thoughts are on what the Lions actually did and what the rest of the NFC North did, if you'll join us at that time.
Absolutely. Appreciate it. Big time, Trevor.
Absolutely. Well, everybody, this is Dalton Wasserman breaking down the NFL draft, which is 3 weeks away. We appreciate your time, Dalton. Thanks for joining us. Everybody out there who's watching, please like, subscribe, share, and enjoy this edition of Believe in Lions. It's brought to you by FanDuel.